All right, so we are on Daf Mem Zayin Amud Aleph, and we're just looking at that last little line of the Mishnah that we saw yesterday on Mem Vav Amud Beis. It had said that in the event that a Kohen is supposed to, when he's doing the avodah, is supposed to have multiple different thoughts. But Chazal made an accommodation, and they said that even if a Kohen comes in with a blank mind, right, not thinking anything, sort of spaced out, just like myself, I guess I would probably be doing that on most days. So the halacha is that it's still a kosher avoda. It's only when he has a proactively pasul thought that he pasels the korban, right? So and the last thing that the Mishnah says is that this is a Tanai base, that the basin sort of hovers over the Kohen and makes this accommodation for him. And part and parcel of that is she'ein hamachshava holeches ela achar ha'oved. That part and parcel of this accommodation is that there can be no interference with the Kohen's thinking from anyone on the outside. So that regardless of what anyone else is thinking, it is only and exclusively the Kohen's machshava that counts, no one else's. And that's to the exclusion even of the owner of the korban, the guy, this Yisrael who comes to the Beis HaMikdash to bring his korban chatas, let's say, even if he yells out, pigul, right, it has no effect whatsoever, right? Even if his intention while the avodah is being done, it's only the Kohen. So the Gemara now says, she'ein hamachshav holeches ela achar ha'oved. Masnisin delo ki haitana. Our Mishnah goes not like the following. D'Tanya Amar Rabbi Elazar b'Rabbi Yossi Shamati Shaba Olam Mifaglin. The Rabbi Elazar b'Rabbi Yossi explicitly states not that way. He says that the owner of the korban, the Yisrael who owns the korban, and brought it to the Beis HaMikdash, through his machshava he can make the animal pigul. Amar Rava, my time of the Rabbi Elazar b'Rabbi Yossi. So Rava says, what is his reasoning? What is his rationale? Da'amar kravi hikriv hamakriv. Because there's a pasuk that uses excessive verbiage, and it says that the bringer shall bring. The bringer shall bring implies that the bringer of the korban, meaning the owner, he's part of the sacrificial process, and therefore his thoughts count. Amar Abaye. So now Abaye says, Rabbi Elazar b'Rabbi Yossi, v'Rabbi Eliezer, v'Rab Shimon ben Elazar, kulhu svirulahu zemechashe v'zeh oved havya machshava. That we're now going to see three Tanoim who are all aligned in their belief that one person can do the avoda and another person can have an improper thought and have that improper thought appended to the avoda. Not like our Mishnah says. Rabbi Elazar b'Rabbi Yossi hada amran. So the first is Rabbi Elazar b'Rabbi Yossi. That's what we just saw. The Rabbi Elazar says that a person, the owner of the korban, can make his korban pigul through his thoughts. Rabbi Eliezer, so what's the second one? Rabbi Eliezer. Ditnan hashochet laobed kochavim shchitaso k'sheira v'Rabbi Eliezer posel. A Kohen is working in the Beis HaMikdash, and a heathen comes and says, I would like you to bring this animal for me as a korban. Now, we do accept Gentile animals. However, the question is it kosher? So the Tanakama says that if the guy is an actual Oved Kochavim, he's not a righteous Gentile, but he's a heathen, he worships idols, then the Kohen's act of Shechita is automatically pasul, even though the Kohen himself is a very pious from Yid. What's the reason? The Tanakama says it's kosher. Rabbi Eliezer says it's pasul. And the reason why Rabbi Eliezer says it's pasul is because the heathen invariably is thinking, during this religious act, he's thinking about Avodah Zarah, his own paganistic rites, his own gods. And therefore, we append his thoughts to the Kohen's actions, and that pasels the korban, because if you shecht for Avodah Zarah, it's pasul. Now let's look at the third one. Reb Shimon ben Elazar ditnan, Klal Omer Reb Shimon ben Elazar, Kol she'in kosher lahatzniya ve'in matzniyan kamohu, huchsher lazeh v'yitzniyo, ubo acher v'hotzio, nischayev zeh b'machshava shel zeh. Now, this is a Mishnah not having to do with Kodshim at all. It's a Mishnah in Masechet Shabbos. And the Mishnah says that according to Reb Shimon ben Elazar, there's a general rule that we know that in order to be over, to violate the malacha of carrying on Shabbos, you have to, it's not like you can carry let's say you have something like a ball of lint, a tiny little piece of lint in your pocket. Have you committed the malacha of carrying? No, it has to be something substantive. It has to be something significant. So let's say you have an insignificant object. So for example, it's not something that anyone would normally store. No one, normal people don't have a lint collection, right? Right. So if a person, if it's an object that's not normally something that people collect and store, or if it's an object that people collect and store, but it's not of a significant size, the amount or the size is not something that someone would significantly put away and store. So if a person has a fetish, he's got a lint fetish, let's say, and for him, he's a lint collector, right? And he's got a piece of lint. And I go over to his lint collection, and I carry out a tiny piece of lint of his outside, because for him it's important and he's the owner of the lint. I am in violation of a malacha of carrying it outside on Shabbos. So you see from here that one person's thoughts can be appended to another person's actions in order to make that a significant act that is with that thought of this object being significant. So it's the same idea as one person's machshava of pigul, because he's the owner of the korban, to be appended to the kohen's pure act without a machshava of pigul. So the Gemara now says, Toravayu islahu de Rebbe Elazar b'Reb Yossi. Now, it's clear that the latter two Tanoim that we just cited subscribe to Rebbe Elazar b'Reb Yossi, who says that you can take the owner's machshava of pigul and append it to the kohen's act to make it possible. Because hashta b'chutz arminan bifnim mibaya. He says, because if this is true for anything that's done outside the Beis HaMikdash, then certainly it would be true for something that's done inside the Beis HaMikdash. So in other words, what are we talking about? If we have an act, because both of them are talking about doing something that's being done outside the Beis HaMikdash. In other words, the previous case of Rabbi Eliezer, which talks about shechting for avodah zarah, it seems I mistranslated. It's not just talking about when it's a Gentile bringing a korban. It's even talking about chulin. It's even talking about where you're shechting for just stam shchita, for meat. But if it's done for avodah zarah, the animal becomes pasul, the animal becomes asur bahana. So what we're seeing is in these latter two illustrations, one having to do with avodah zarah, the other one having to do with Shabbos, both of them are not related to the Beis HaMikdash. And yet we still say that you can append thought of one to the action of another. Certainly then in the Beis HaMikdash, where thought is so elevated in its prominence and importance, then if you hold that you can do this appending outside the Beis HaMikdash, then certainly halachically the appending of thought to someone else's actions will apply inside the Beis HaMikdash. But Rebbe Elazar b'Reb Yossi, lesle ditoravayu. But Rebbe Elazar b'Reb Yossi, who says that, who was the original halacha that you can, the owner of the korban, his machshav of pigul can be appended to the kohen's pure act, may be that he doesn't hold of the other two tanoim, because dilma bifnimhu de amrinan b'chutz lo amrinan. Because maybe the only time that we do this appending is inside the Beis HaMikdash when we're dealing with kudshim. But when we're not dealing with kudshim, where thought is not as significant of a factor in these actions, then maybe he would not hold of the other two tanoim. And Reb Shimon ben Elazar islay de Rabbi Eliezer. Now let's look at the latter two tanoim. Reb Shimon ben Elazar is the one who talked about Shabbos. So certainly he would subscribe to Rabbi Eliezer's halacha having to do with avodah zarah, because hashta b'Shabbos arminan b'avodas kochavim mibaya. Because if it's true for Shabbos that you can append one person's thoughts, the lint guy, to the other person's actions of carrying, then certainly for avodah zarah, because in many ways an act of avodah zarah has many similarities in its halachic particulars to the avoda that's done in the Beis Hamikdash. So therefore, there's much more reason to say by avoda zara that thought is raised in its prominence. So if you raise thought in Shabbos observance prominence, then certainly you would raise it in avoda zara halachas. But for Rabbi Eliezer, less later Rav Shimon ben Elazar, because Dilma Bavodas Kolchavim Hu Damrinan Kein Bifnim, Avol Shabbos Melechas Machsheves Asra Torah. But it could be that the Rabbi Eliezer, who stated his halacha vis-a-vis avodah zara, that if a person shechts an animal on behalf of an oved avodah zara, that the animal becomes asur, right? Maybe that's only true when it comes to hilchos avodah zara and kachim, where thought is raised in its prominence. But maybe by Hilchas Shabbos, we do not append one person's thoughts to another person's actions, because after all, in Hilchas Shabbos, we require for the malacha to be an offense. It has to be something that's called the meleches machsheves. It has to be done with proper kavana. It has to be done with complete cognizance of the doer. And here, since the doer thinks that this lint is insignificant, and it's only someone else's thoughts that raises its significance, maybe that halacha would not apply. So therefore, what the Gemara is really concluding with is, even though we've aligned these three opinions, that say, with all three saying that you can append one person's thoughts to another person's actions, that doesn't necessarily mean that they all agree with each other. One Tana might hold that that's only true when it comes to Kachim. Another Tana might hold that it's only true when it comes to Kachim and Avodah Zarah, whereas the third Tana might tell you it applies in all cases, both Kachim, Avodah Zarah, and Hilchas Shabbos. Hadron Alach Beis Shammai. Let us now go on and start the fifth parak, Ezehu Mekoman. So Ezehu Mekoman deals with the spatial specifics of where in the Beis Hamikdash do you do the karbanos. So we're some of these are things that we've already seen, but let's just review them. Ezehu Mekoman Shel Zevachim. Where are you supposed to offer in the Beis Hamikdash these particular karbanos? So Kadshe Katim Shikritas and Batzafa. Any Kadshe Kachim, remember there are two levels of Kachim. There's Kadshe Kachim and Kachim Kalim. Right? Kadshe Kachim involve karbanos that are brought either by a tzibor or they are brought by an individual for a sin offering. But karbanos that are brought by an individual on a voluntary basis are called Kachim Kalim. They're lower level. So for all Kadshe Kachim, they have to be slaughtered on the northern flank of the Mizbeach, and we've talked about that before. So if you're looking directly at the Mizbeach, you've walked into the temple and you're looking at the Mizbeach, it's to your right. You always slaughter it on the northern side. So now we're going to go into some specific examples of Kadshe Kachim. The first example that we choose is Par V'Sor Shel Yom HaKippurim, Shchitasan B'Tzafon, V'Kibul Daman B'Chlishares B'Tzafon. So both the bull and the goat that are brought by the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur have to be slaughtered in the north, and their Kabbalah, the receiving of the blood in a receptacle, has to be done in the north as well with a ministering vessel. V'daman to'un hazaya al bein habadim ve'al haparoches ve'al mizbeach hazahav. And there are three different stages of placement of blood, like we've learned before. The Kohen has to flick the blood inside the Holy of Holies in front of the staves of the ark. He's got to sprinkle the blood on the paroches, on the curtain that divides between the Holy and the Holy of Holies, and he's got to place blood on the four corners of the golden inner altar. Matana echas mehen me'akeves. And even if he misses one placement of blood out of all of those, I think we said it's a total of either 23 or 27.
So it's 4, 7 is the paroches? Is 7?
There's 7 on the paroches. There's 4 on the mizbeach, and I don't remember the number of flicks. I think it's 7 flicks or achas, 7 flicks on the bein habadim, but you get to a total of either 23 or 20 or 27, depending upon whether you do 2 placements of blood on the mizbeach or 1 placement, like we saw previously. And shiorei hadam hayashofech al yesod ma'aravi shel mizbeach hachitzon. Whatever blood is left over has to be poured into the spout that is on the west side of the base of the outer altar. V'im lo nasan lo ikev. But b'di'evet, if you did not pour out the shiarei hadam, the leftover blood, it's still kosher. Parim hanisrafim usirim hanisrafim shechitasim b'tzafon v'kibul dabim b'chli sharis b'tzafon. Now let's go to our next case, whether it comes to the burnt bulls or the burnt goats. Now what we mean by burnt bulls and burnt goats are the following three cases. A par helam davar, a bull that is brought by the congregation when they err in halacha, a bull that is brought by a Kohen Gadol when he errs in halacha, or a goat that is brought by the tzibur when they err in halacha regarding avodah zarah. They accidentally commit the sin of avodah zarah. So in all of those cases, the reason why they're called burnt is because you place the innards of the animal on the altar. However, the carcass of the animal is supposed to be taken outside of the Beis HaMikdash and incinerated there. You do not burn the entire animal on the Mizbeach, nor do you allow any portion of the meat of the animal to be eaten by anyone. So it is supposed to be slaughtered on the northern flank, like we learned before. You have to do the Kabbalah in a Klishares in the north. V'daman ton hazay ala paroches al Mizbeach hazahav. And you place the blood on the paroches, sprinkle on the paroches, and on the inner altar, and matana echas mehen me'akeves. And even leaving out one placement out of the 11 placements of blood, the 7 on the paroches and the 4 on the altar, it will b'di'evid make it no good. And shiarei hadam hayeshavech al yesod maravi shel mizbeach achitzon v'im lo nasan lo ikev. And then you take the remaining blood of these karbanos and you pour it out onto the yesod, like we learned before. But b'di'evet, if that was not done, it's still kosher.
This is not Yom Kippur.
This is not Yom Kippur. This is the next example. We're on to the next case. Elu va'elu nisrafim ha'beis hadeshen. And in all cases of the parim hanisrafim and the seirim hanisrafim, like I mentioned before, you take the carcass of either the bull or the goat and you burn it outside the temple in a place called the Beis Hadeshen. What is the Beis Hadeshen? It's located outside the temple somewhere. We haven't identified where that place is. And it's the same place where the ash is daily cleared out and heaped on that, sort of like some kind of mound of like an ash heap. And that's where you burn the carcass of these animals. The Gemara now says, V'nisni nami v'kibul damim b'chli sharis b'tzafa. So the Gemara says, you started off this Mishnah by telling me that for all kadshei kadshim, the law is you slaughter the animal on the northern flank. And then you started going into specific examples. But you didn't tell me that the general rule is that for all kadshei kadshim, not only do you slaughter on the north, but you also do the Kabbalah Sadam and Kli Shares in the north. Why not? Why didn't you just tell me across the board that that's the rule? So the Gemara answers, Kevin diika asha mitzara dekibul damo biyadhu shayre. The answer is because there's one example of kadshei kadshim where you do the Kabbalah not with a Kli, but rather with your hand. The Kohen actually, right after the slaughter, places his hand and allows the blood to flow. He cups his hand and allows the blood to flow right into his hand. And that's the case of an Asha Mitzora. An Asha Mitzora is a guilt offering of a person who's going through the Tzara'as purification process. And the Kohen is going to take that blood that he gathered with his hand and is going to place the blood on the Mitzora's ear, thumb, and big toe, like we've learned previously. So the Gemara says, what are you talking about? V'lo v'hakatani lo lekaman asham nazir v'asham mitzara shchitasen b'tzafon v'kibul damim b'chli sharis b'tzafon. But 1 second. The Mishnah is going to tell us explicitly later on in this parak that both for the guilt offering of the nazir and the guilt offering for the mitzora, it's slaughtered in the north and you do the Kabbalah in a receptacle. You're telling me that it's in the Kohen's hand? It says in the Mishnah later on that it's in a receptacle. So me'ikara savar kibul damo biyadhu shayre, v'kivin de lo sagile ela b'chli hadar tanye. So the Gemara says actually both are correct. The initial blood receiving is done with the Kohen's hand, and then afterwards another Kohen comes and receives the remainder of the blood in a kli. And therefore our Tana said that since you don't have 100% of the Kabbalah being done in a Kli, I'm not going to list it in the opening Mishnah as the rule that you always do the Kabbalah in a Kli. But later, when we go to the details of the Asham Mitzorah, he also needs to have a Kli, so therefore I'll write it over there. And so what am I referring to? The Tanya v'lokach yachol b'Kli tamulomar v'nosan. Manasina ba'atzmo shel kohen af lekicha ba'atzmo shel kohen. So the Brisa says as follows. There's a pasuk referring to the Asham Mitzorah that states two verbs. The Kohen shall take and the Kohen shall place. V'lokach v'nosan. And those two verbs are therefore scripturally connected. Just like the placement of the blood on the Mitzorah's body is done by the Kohen's own body, meaning the Kohen uses his fingers to place the blood on the Mitzorah's body, on his ear, his thumb, and on his big toe, so too does the receiving or the taking of the blood from the animal have to be done with the Kohen's own body, his hand, and not with a receptacle. Yachol af lemizbeach kain tamulomar ki kachatas ha'asham hu machatas te'una kli af asham ta'un kli. Now you might think that therefore all of the blood Kabbalah can be done by the Kohen's hand and not with a kli. So therefore the pasuk in that very same parsha says that the chatas and asham are related to each other, and therefore just like a korban chatas must have its blood received with a kli, so too does the korban asham have to be received by a kli. So nimtzei sato, and by the way, how do we know that a chatas has to be received by a kli? So Rashi just tells us the background information that the Gemara says elsewhere, that the very first time that we find karbanos being brought by the Jewish people is at Har Sinai. And at Har Sinai it says vayasem ba'aganos, that they placed the blood in receptacles. And we make a scriptural connection between the chatas, between all korban chatas and the burnt offerings that were brought at Har Sinai. So from there we learn that when a chatas is brought, it always has to have its blood received in a kli. So therefore, if now we're connecting the korban asham of a mitzorah to a chatas, then an asham also has to have its blood received in a kli. Nimtzei sato omer asham mitzorah shnei kohanim mekablim estamo, echad biyad ve'echad b'kli. So it turns out that the kohen has to do two kabbalos when he receives the blood for an asham mitzorah, one in his hand and one in a receptacle, and therefore you're going to need two kohanim to do this avoda. One kohen is going to be working with his hand, and the other one is going to be holding a kli right after him. Zeh shekiblo b'kli balo eitzel mizbeach, v'zeh shekiblo biyad balo eitzel mitzorah. And therefore the kohen who received the blood in a kli goes to the mizbeach to sprinkle the blood. And the kohen who received the blood in his hand walks over directly to the mitzorah who's at the shar Nikanor, waiting to have the blood applied to his ear, his thumb, and his big toe. Next, we're just going to do a few more lines since we have so much time available to us now. So the Gemara now says, Par v'sar shel Yom HaKippurim. Let's go to that case of the bull and the goat that is brought on Yom Kippur. So we said that what? That it has to be done in the north, and the Kabbalah has to be done in the north. So the Gemara now says, Mechti, tzafon ba'ola ksiv nisni ola bereisha. So the Gemara says, I understand that this Mishnah is the beginning of a long sequence of examples of Kadshe Kadshim where the Shechita has to be done in the north. But if you wanted to list it in some logical order, shouldn't the first item on your list have been the Korban Ola, the standard Korban Ola? That is the first thing that's written in Sefer Vayikra, where it says that you shall offer it in the north. The very first time we are introduced to this idea that you shecht it in the north is written in the context of the Korban Ola in the first chapter of Sefer Vayikra. Why are you jumping to something that is only in the 16th chapter of Vayikra as your first example? So the Gemara says, Chatas Aidi Da'asi Midrasha Chavivale. So the Gemara answers, you're right, but the way that we know that a Korban Chatas has to be shechted in the north, even though shechting in the north is only written by the Korban Ola, is based on non-explicitness in the Torah. It's based on rabbinic exegesis, because all the Torah says bimkom asher tishachet ha'ola tishachet ha'chatas. The Torah doesn't specifically state or explicitly state that you shecht the chatas in the north. It says where you shech the ola, shech the chatas, and we learn, therefore, we apply that it means in the north. And so, therefore, since something is derived from a non-explicit passage, it is more precious to us because we prefer to put forth things that are learned exegetically before things that are written explicitly. In other words, it's more Torah sheba'al peh than that which is written explicitly, and therefore we give it priority and prominence. Okay, so the Gemara now says, "V'nisni chatos achitzonios." So the Gemara's question is, well, I don't understand. Why? Okay, fine, I get it that you want to list the chatas before the ola, but why choose a special chatas of Yom Kippur? Choose a standard chatas that also is derived exegetically. So the Gemara answers, "Aide denichnas daman lifnai v'lifnim chaviv alei." So the Gemara answers, but there's another reason why Yom Kippur is listed first, because its blood is brought all the way into the Holy of Holies. And that's why it's more precious, and that's why it's listed first. So therefore, it's not based upon the sequence as it's written in Leviticus, but rather that which is more precious to the Tana because of its prominence and importance. So the Gemara now says, "V'tzafona ba'ola heicha ksiva." Okay, so Taka, tell me, where is it written explicitly in the Torah that you have to slaughter the animal in the north? It says, "V'shachat oso al yerech hamizbeach tzafona." As the Torah says in the first chapter of Vayikra, he shall slaughter it, referring to the sheep that is being brought as an ola, on the right flank of the mizbech. So therefore it's written explicitly. So the Gemara says, okay, fine. Ashkechan ben son, ben bakar min ola. That's all well and good for a sheep that's being brought as an ola. But you can also bring a bull as an ola. How do you know that it too must be slaughtered in the north? It doesn't say that in that paragraph, which is even an earlier paragraph in Vayikra. First, the Torah says, referring to bulls, when you're bringing an ola, and there it doesn't say slaughter it in the north. And the very next paragraph says, V'im min hatzon karbano. And if you're going to bring a sheep as an ola, then slaughter it in the north. So we know that north is written explicitly by sheep. How do you know about slaughtering a bull in the north? So Amar Kra, V'im min hatzon. Vav Mosef al inyan rishon, v'yilamed elyon mitachton. So the Gemara answers, whenever you have two contiguous paragraphs in the Torah, and they are joined by the letter Vav, so the second paragraph starts with the letter Vav, that means that the second paragraph is really a continuation, halachically, and you can apply the laws that are contained in paragraph B and apply them to paragraph A. And that is how I know, says the Gemara, that even though a bull is not written explicitly that it's got to be in the north, but since it's appended to the second paragraph which talks about the sheep that's in the north, I know the bull has to be in the north as well. And this is where we'll hold it for today.